Oh, you started.
Hold on. Why is it not showing my video? There we go.
There you are. Oh, you've gone again.
Okay.
Hello, we've got 14 people here so far. So we do have a full house. So perhaps we'll wait a couple of minutes before we start.
Sounds good.
I don't know if you're there again, Suzanne. Suzanne joined early. I hope you're there. You came back. What time is it now?
Oh, yeah, Suzanne's her hand.
Ah, hi.
Suzanne.
Okay. So we'll give it a couple of minutes.
Oh, yeah. So some more. How many are we expecting, Emma?
Full house, so 100. We're at 41. 2 people are flocking in. We'll see. We'll see. I think what we'll do is we'll give it until like 2 minutes past. I'll give it a couple of minutes.
Sure.
I'll just give it another minute, I think.
Mm.
Yeah, we'll wait until 1 minute past and then we'll start.
Sorry. I can't control that.
That's why I've got earphones in. So I thought, well, if the dog barks, then maybe you won't all hear him.
You're clever. I should have thought of that. Sorry, everyone.
I know my dog is actually now barking, which is really strange, but I don't know if you can hear it.
You probably heard that. Mine does.
Yeah.
There's also monkeys.
Oh, that's quite cool. Yeah.
Yeah, they're making fun.
Are they naughty?
Yeah, I can hear them sort of challenging the dogs. It's like a clicking noise.
Oh, we've got some greetings from Canada. Hello.
Oh, hello, Canada. Oh, wow.
So we're up to 52 people. The time's 1 minute past. We get started. What do you think?
Can we wait? Let's wait 1 more minute because they're coming in. Yeah.
Okay. And New Orleans. Hello. Bavaria. Hello. Exciting. All different times, all over the place. So what I'll do is I think I'll bring up
there we go.
Slides.
Okay.
Okay. I'll bring up the chat box so I can see what you're all saying.
Yeah, wondering if there's a question that I need to address.
Australian in India. So we've got somebody from India, Tennessee, Germany. Hello. Right. Yes, I think we'll get started. So first of all, I'll make apologies because Anna Bouchier, the Swiss Foundation Director, unfortunately had a bereavement, so she won't be here tonight. I'm stepping in. My name's Emma Mortiboy. I'm the Public Fundraising Officer and the person that sent you all those emails. So I suppose it's quite nice to see my face, maybe. Hello. And then over to Lily.
Hi, I'm the Communications Manager at APOPO. I'm based in Tanzania, East Africa. Which is also where our sort of operational headquarters is and where we do all of the training of our rats. So yeah, we'll just get started. Our first topic is animal welfare. We've had a lot of people asking us, where do we get the rats? Well, here in the species of rats that we use is the African giant pouched rat, Chrysotomys and Sorge. They're sort of cousins of the Gambian rats. They're indigenous to most of sub-Saharan Africa. So here in Tanzania, they're literally everywhere. Unfortunately, my dogs sometimes catch one or two in the early hours of the morning. So when we need to breed for a particular program, we would ask our local trappers to go and catch some of these rats. And we look at where our nurturing breeding mums are from, which part of Morogoro, which is the city we're in. And then we would ask for males from a different part of town, obviously, because we want to change up the gene pool as much as possible. So once they bring them in, they go through a 2-week quarantine, similar to COVID. and then we get rid of all the fleas and things and introduce her to a couple of suitors, and she gets to decide who she wants to mate with. The coupling doesn't take long, and once the male is done, he's actually set free. We send him back to where he came from. As long as we don't keep the rats for more than 3 months, we can release them back into the wild. So another question is, how do we take care of the rats? So what do they eat? Well, we have kennels for both male and female. The siblings will stay together until they come of age, and then we would separate sisters from brothers. But if sisters are happy to stay together and brothers are happy to stay together, they will. We will keep them together as long as they're happy. Our rats are omnivores, so we give them fresh fruit and vegetables. They love bananas and peanuts. And we also give them small sun-dried sardines that we call daga here in Tanzania, to kind of boost their protein. But we also import pellets from Australia, specifically made for them, rodent pellets that we want to make sure they get all the vitamins and minerals that, I don't know, they might be licking salts in a while that they wouldn't get in their kennels. So to just cover our bases. Once a week, we infuse their water bottles with extra minerals and vitamins as well, just to make sure they're getting all that they need. Our mine detection rats, they have training every morning, Monday through Friday. They would go out to a big training minefield. All the mines are deactivated, so it's completely safe. But even then, they are too light to set off the landmines, so they're in no harm's way. We would train them for about half an hour every morning before they would then, because it's early morning and they're nocturnal, they kind of just want to take a nap. So after they're done with their training, they go into their travel cages and they go into I just realized, Emma, am I going
Yeah,
through
these are my questions. That's fine. I'm letting you do that. That's fine.
I'll just finish this one and you can continue with the next one. Sorry.
Don't be.
So they, once they're done with their training, they would then go into their travel cages and basically sleep off the rest of the day. Even though we have trained them to work in the early hours of the morning, they're still nocturnal, so they're up all night. Back to you, Emma.
I've been told, I haven't been to Tanzania yet, but you have to be super quiet around the kennels during the day. Is that right? We have to let them sleep. And it's really important, actually, because you mentioned the transportation cages, and I think a lot of times on social media, people see those particular cages, and they're designed specifically, aren't they, Lily, to make the rats feel safe? I don't know if you can explain that probably better than I can, actually. I will hand back to you on that one.
Well, rats are naturally prey, so they don't like big, wide open spaces generally. We actually have to train that behavior out of them, that fear of humans, fear of being out in the open. It's part of the training process, which we'll get into a little bit later.
Yeah.
But so the cages are small. We put in some wood chippings to just make them comfortable. They'll have a water bottle nearby, and they just tend to curl up into a ball and go to sleep.
That's really it. But they are just the transportation. They are not the kennels. No.
Their kennels are much bigger. They need enough space to sort of run around, and it's actually a series of connected tunnels, and then we block off when it's a different set. Yeah.
And within the kennels there are wooden tripods so that they can gnaw and scratch as well, because their teeth and their nails continuously grow. And we put in nest pots as well, just to sort of replicate that natural nesting behavior. They're cleaned regularly, they're aired out beautifully. Lily's in Tanzania. I can't wait to get out to Tanzania. COVID's stopping me from coming to see you guys at the moment, but I can't wait to come and see you. Some of the other questions that we had just on animal welfare. So in terms of how we look after our rats, they actually have a daily health check by an animal health officer. So just sort of making sure everyone's in tip-top conditions, there isn't an eye infection or anything like that. One thing I should add about the kennels is that we use non-aromatic wood, so that prevents any respiratory disorders. So the wood shavings actually are really, really important, and we use the right ones. They have those daily health checks, but they also have an extensive health check every single week by a vet. We keep records on every single one of our animals, and being endemic to sub-Saharan Africa means that they actually are really hardy, resistant to the tropical diseases that might sort of float around in those areas. And the only injection they ever need is just rabies and deworming, and potentially, as Lily says as well, just some vitamin supplements potentially in the water every now and then. One of the critical things, and often when I talk about my job, people assume that we just send rats out to their death. That is not the case. It takes 5 kilograms to set off a landmine, and our rats weigh between 1 and 1.4 kilograms. They are too light to set off landmines, and no animal has ever been harmed in APOPO's operation. So that is really, really important. Moving on, I think this is back to, retirement. So we've actually had quite a lot of questions regarding retirement, what happens to our rats. So a rat might start slowing down and showing signs they're perhaps just not as keen to get up and go to work. It's fair enough. I think that's like us humans. And at that point, they're retired to their home cage. So it's a huge, beautiful outdoor cage, and it's filled with enrichment toys and ropes and branches. We've had a few people ask whether or not they can adopt one of our hero rats when they reach retirement. There's a few reasons that we say no to that. And that is one, because they are often retired with their siblings and their friends, and they interact with one another. The transportation and the removal from that environment would actually be potentially quite cruel. And the other thing is that actually our hero rats and our hero dogs have given their lives to APOPO. They are hugely important to us. We want to take care of them, and we don't necessarily know where they're going. So we would have to, if they were going to be rehomed somewhere else, we'd have to make sure that that place was entirely suitable, and then continue to make sure that our hero rats were okay. That would be really time consuming. And obviously APOPO's mission is to, remove landmines and stop the spread of tuberculosis. So in a sense, it's kinder to the animals, and it's actually much more efficient for us as an organization to have them retire, in Tanzania to their retirement pen. Let's see, I think we're now on training. Over to you, Lily. Oh, I skipped. I'll go back. There we go.
Sorry. So one of the questions we've gotten is, how long does it take to train a TB or mine action rat? Well, it takes between 9 months and a year to fully train a rat. The very first stage of training begins when they're about 4 to 5 weeks old. Their eyes start to open, and then we would start socializing them, which basically means playing with them. It's my favorite, personally. So we would just get them used to human smells, sounds of cars, flowers, and things that they might encounter, so that they can learn to just ignore them. That's normal, and focus on the task at hand. So once they're socialized, we also habituate them to being out during the day. As I said earlier, they're nocturnal, so it's not natural for them to be out during the day. But it's a two-way trust thing. We need to learn to trust them, because when they're afraid, or if there's any kind of emotional reaction, they do tend to bite quite hard. So we have to teach them that we're good, and they need to reassure us that we can trust them as well. After they're socialized, we begin basic clicker training. It's a little box that makes a click sound. So a handler will put a little baby rat onto we call it a soil table. So there's soil on a table, basically, and then they'll hear a click and they get fed. They hear a click and they get fed, and it continues. After a day or so, they understand that sound of click means food. Then we introduce, depending on whether it's TB or mine action, we would introduce a positive TB sample from a TB patient that has been inactivated. So it's been heated until it's pretty much harmless. Or if it's the landmine detection rats, they would get a tea egg or a tea infuser that has a little bit of TNT inside. And we teach them, they're very curious by nature, so we teach them to just explore this table. When they come to this new smell, and they put their paws on it for the landmine detection rats, they will hear the click and they know they're going to get a reward. So they start to look for that smell. And that's the same with TB, but it's a slightly different setting. So there's a small cage with sort of glass sides, and it has 3 holes underneath, and under one of the 3 holes they will find the sample, and we teach them to put their nose in the hole and hold it there for 3 seconds, and when they do that they hear a click and they get a reward. So this is the basics of how we train them. Then we move on to more samples. So instead of just one positive sample, they're introduced to multiple samples, and they have to differentiate between the positive samples and negative samples. And for the mine detection rats, they have to be 100% accurate, as well as the TB detection rats, before they're allowed to move on to the next stage. From this point, they are then moved into a bigger, for TB detection rats, it's a bigger cage, so it has 10 holes underneath, and they will slowly increase the number of samples that they're checking. And for the mine detection rats, the area that they're searching gets bigger and bigger, and we start to teach them how to systematically search a box, which means they have to get used to wearing a little harness, which is then attached to a line between the 2 boots of a trainer, and they go up the line, then they take half a meter step, and then it comes back down. We found that the rats can smell a particular scent within a 1 meter radius. So when they're going across, they're taking half a meter step and making sure that it overlaps. And we're 100% sure that they've checked every inch of a box. And then they would progress to our training minefield, where they're for the first time introduced to actual landmines that the Tanzanian Defense Forces kindly gave us and said, you know, here you go, you can train your rats in these, because we've been pretty peaceful so far, knock on wood. And we train them with buried landmines. They were buried when we moved here and we set up the training minefield. So they've been in the ground for quite some time, and they vary in depth between 6 to 12 centimeters, much deeper, and it wouldn't detonate. So we're not too sort of worried about that. Another question that has also just been asked is, how many rats do we have that are currently working? Well, we have 288 rats globally. 80 of those are operational, which means they're working in real settings. So really detecting TB in one of the 3 countries that we work, or they're working in one of the 3 countries where we're detecting landmines. We have 80 rats are operational, 39 are retired in various sites. So I think Emma's going to talk a little bit more about that. Or did you already, Emma? You mentioned that when they reach a certain age, when they're sort of
I didn't talk about the age actually.
When they reach about 6 to 8, we start to watch them like hawks, and you know, if they're showing any signs of reluctance to get up in the morning, or you know, not performance seems to be dropping, we would then just retire them, because it has to be on their terms as well. They need to be willing to work with us. And then we have 169 rats here in Marlborough currently in training, which is a lot of rats.
So someone's just asked whether or not they detect landmines or cluster bombs as well.
So at the moment, we don't have any rats that are being trained to detect cluster munitions. However, our rats are finding all kinds of things. They're finding bombs, they're finding their unexploded bits and bobs. Sometimes it's just a piece of a landmine, or you know, they're even finding small arms and ammunition. They're finding a lot of different things.
One of the good things about them, though, is that they do just detect the explosives, don't they? They don't detect the metal. Yeah, so we're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So we're not digging up bits of scrap metal unnecessarily and spending lots of time doing that. It is just simply that those items that contain explosives. And is that right that some of the improvised mines may not necessarily contain metal? So it can, it's doubly
Yeah,
good that they're.
absolutely. We're finding more and more globally that, sort of landmines, there's this new category. So landmines are split up into basically two main groups. One is anti-personnel, which is aimed at people. So it starts, like Emma said, from about 5 kilos, depends on the landmine, obviously. And then it takes the weight of a person to set it off. And then we have with anti-vehicle landmines, which are aimed at, vehicles like tanks or armored vehicles, and they take a lot more weight in order to be set off. But then we're finding these improvised mines, like in places like Colombia, there's almost all the mines are improvised. So it's just a plastic bag with explosives, and the only thing that's metal is a spring. So it's extremely dangerous for a metal detector because it might not catch it. And that's where the rats would be a really, really huge asset.
Just a quick one, because people are putting their hands up. If you want to use the Q&A, I should have done a bit of an intro really. So if you do have any questions, if you have a little look, I'll move on to the next slide, but if you have a look, there should be Q&A. So if you want to pop your question in there and I'll read through them. I've moved on to operations for now, Lily. I hope that's okay. Sorry.
It's fine. It's fine. I just back to the cluster bombs. Our hero dogs are actually currently doing a study. We're doing a study to see if they can detect cluster bombs as well, and that's going really well. So it is in the future, but it's a separate method, a little bit.
Okay.
How long do the rats work during the day, and how do they recover? Well, they work about 30 minutes tops. In the morning, they would do one box about the size of a tennis court, and then
what time in the morning though, Lily? It's super early.
Well, we get them up around 6 a.m. Into their travel cages, onto the bus, the school bus. We head out to the minefield, and then they would then, as soon as it's daylight, they begin. But by around 8 o'clock, it's already getting pretty warm. And they don't do well with a lot of heat. They actually overheat quite quickly. So within that half hour, a half hour is about the tops that they can do. But then if you have a group of like 50 rats that are doing half an hour, it works out really well.
Yeah. There's a question about whether or not there's any differences between male and female rats. I know the answer to this because I asked this question. None. No difference.
It's negligible. We had a researcher actually do some research back in the day, and she found that there's no difference pretty much.
Yeah. And can visitors visit the training site is another question that's just come in.
So here in Tanzania, we do accept group visits because, if you've come out all this way, the least we can do is show you the rats. So I would be the person to contact if you're visiting Tanzania, Karibu sana, which means you're always welcome. We would sort of arrange for a visit, and you can either choose landmine detection, rat training, or TB detection, or both, if that's something that interests you. You could probably fit this all into one morning because it's at different times of the day, of the morning rather. So we could schedule all of it into just one morning. So it doesn't need to take up a lot of your itinerary. And we'll be happy to facilitate that. You just need to send me an email. And in Cambodia, we got a lot of questions, but obviously there it's a live minefield. So we actually set up a visitor center in Siem Reap, where we have live mock demonstrations for visitors to see. It's actually a great place. So if you're ever in Siem Reap, do visit. That kind of covers that.
Yeah. Okay, should we move on to operations? We'll come back to the Q&A, I think, towards the end then. Yeah.
So one of the questions we received is, can you explain how the process of starting up a new program would be? Yeah, I mean, APOPO is always interested in scaling up our operations to new countries. It does depend on a number of factors, though, and overcoming a lot of bureaucratic tape. When we enter a new country, we need to initially be invited by the government, or more accurately, the Mine Action Authority in that country. There's lots of other mine action operators around the world, of which APOPO is just one. So to make sure that the mines are properly cleared, and to the highest standard, we all need to be registered by an international body called the International Mine Action Standard, or IMAS. Then the country authority needs to invite us, and then we would then see about funding, which is our main hurdle. Funding, we need to be able to raise enough funds to do at least 1 year of work. And it comes out to roughly $750,000 to start up a new program, like we recently did for Zimbabwe. So that was on hold for a couple of years as we were searching to reach that target. It doesn't really make sense to begin unless you can, because once you get started, it's likely that you'll probably be able to fund the rest of the years. The question also asked, how do we stop or move out of a country? Well, in places like Laos or Vietnam, we were there briefly more for capacity building. So we were training a local NGO how to demine, basically. But then our funding ran out, and with no funding, we couldn't stay. For Mozambique, it was a little bit different. We were in Mozambique from, I think it was 2002 until 2015, when Mozambique was declared mine-free, which is great and a huge achievement milestone on our part. But after that, we stayed on for residual tasks, but it was, it wasn't landmines anymore. So we have been able to stay in country and help them with other problems. For example, there was a ammunition depot that blew up and spread ammo everywhere, and it was impossible without the rats. So the rats did a really amazing job. Another question I've had on the list is, when will Cambodia be free of landmines? Well, a very specific questions. We hope the country deadline for Cambodia is 2025, which is for most of the countries that have signed up to the Ottawa Treaty. Now, the Ottawa Treaty is an agreement between countries of the world that they will no longer use landmines, they will no longer manufacture them, and they will destroy any stockpiles they have. And if there's any that are under the ground, they need to dig them up and destroy them. So Cambodia has said to this Ottawa Treaty, this body that sort of monitors this, that they will be done by 2025. But again, it all depends on funding. It depends on how quickly things can expand. We are currently, like, Cambodia is our biggest program. We have, 3 different sites that we're working on, 3 different teams. We have hero rats, with hero dogs. So we're doing our best to get to this deadline. But
is it right that not every country is signed as well? Is that right?
No, I think we're at 140 something countries.
Okay.
That have signed. So there's quite a few that haven't, some of which are like the United States. Are yet to sign. So some of the big guns have yet to sign, also China. So until everybody signs and really puts effort into removing the landmines, it's going to be difficult. And in places like Syria, Afghanistan, they're still planting them. So there's work in progress. It's going to be a while. It's not a quick fix, unfortunately.
No.
So yeah, go on.
No. So I was just going to move on to some of the questions that we had about efficiency. So there were a few different questions asking, sort of leading on from impact. So these statistics, actually, getting a sneak peek of our latest annual report. And I think the key thing about landmines and tuberculosis, actually, but particularly with landmines, is that actually we don't know, nobody knows how many are buried in the ground. So to be able to say a percentage of the total would be absolutely impossible. So the best way to look at it is to look at the beneficiaries, how much land has been cleared, how many landmines and other explosives have been removed. But actually, most important thing, I think, is actually just how many people have been freed from the terror. So far to date, our impact is phenomenal, actually. We have freed over 1 million people from the terror of landmines. And that might mean that children can now walk safely to school without fear. It might mean they can just play in their local area. But it also means that families can farm their lands and bring themselves out of poverty by growing their own produce, selling it in the market. It is completely transformative. In terms of tuberculosis, our detection rats are incredible. So in terms of efficiencies, I should probably add that our hero rats, is that under this section? It is one of the questions, wasn't it? So our hero rats can search 200 square meters. So to give you a sense of scale, that's the size of a tennis court in half an hour for mines. That would take a manual deminer 4 days. So they may only work that half an hour in the morning, but it's actually equivalent to 4 days work of a manual deminer. So really, really phenomenal. In terms of the TB, they will check 100 samples in 20 minutes, which can take a lab technician up to 4 days. So again, the impact of our animals and the efficiency of what they're doing is really, really, really huge. I think we had a question about whether or not, somebody asked whether or not we had to, once after we used our animals, there are traditional methods were used to sweep the area. So when we first start working, as an example, we'll take Cambodia in a country, we will often work with partner mine action operators. So they may at first, and we are taking part in the GICHD study. So the GIHCD, that's the Geneva International Centre for Humanitarian Demining. So that's the expert authority on mining, and they want to know, be reassured that our animals are 100% effective. So when we first start work in a country such as Cambodia, the mine action partners might want to just double check at first, and then once they pass all of their studies and they're completely reassured after usually, I think a maximum is it of like a few months, Lily, then we don't have to do it at all. They completely trust our animals, and that obviously improves efficiency hugely. So hopefully that answers that question. The key thing is our animals have never missed a landmine during operations. That's the bottom line. Sometimes we need to prove that, sometimes we need to build the trust, but once that trust is there, they never miss the landmines. There was another question regarding accreditation. So again, externally, the GICHD, so that sort of external authoritative body, they have accredited all of our work. It depends on which countries we work in. So in Cambodia, we have the CMAA, which is the Cambodia Mine Action and Victim Assistance Authority. So they will also accredit our work. So there's lots of external accreditation, but also we have a really robust internal accreditation system. So we have standard operating procedures. We, very strict about the training, I think Lily touched on earlier. And we wouldn't allow any of our animals to go out and operate unless they were 100% effective in finding the tuberculosis or the explosives. So I think I've answered the questions that came in on that. Is it worth having a look at the questions that we've got quite a few building up?
I love that the USA apologizes for the past 4 years.
Oh.
There was a question here about TB. I know we've been talking about landmine detection quite a bit. Are the TB detecting rats actually used by the health services? Yes. We have partner clinics here in Tanzania, in Mozambique, and in Ethiopia. Here in Tanzania, there's 75 partner clinics. It started out with 4 because it was obviously quite a hard pitch to sell. But eventually they saw that we are able to help them. So basically, the clinics in sub-Saharan Africa, they mainly use microscopy to test for tuberculosis. So they would ask for a sputum sample, which is the liquid in the lungs. It gets coughed up into a little cup. They would just smear into that onto a slide and look at it under a microscope. Now, there's a lot of other mycobacteria besides tuberculosis mycobacteria in our bodies. So it's actually quite difficult to see that. But our rats, we ask from our partner clinics for second samples. So when a patient comes in, doctor suspects that patient might have TB, they would give 2 samples. One they would test and one APOPO would test. For the rats, it's incredibly interesting. It's just to give you kind of an idea of what I mean. It's like if you're looking under the microscope, you actually have to see it. So let's say, a friend, you want to be sure that a friend is going to eat garlic, and you want to see the garlic in her hand and she's going to eat it. Now, if your friend has eaten garlic the next morning, you will be able to tell she's eaten garlic by the smell. It's very similar with the rats. They can smell, even if there's no TB bacteria in a particular sample, they're still able to smell it. And that's why the conventional method, which finds 20 to 60% of all cases, it means you could go home 50-50 chance here in Tanzania that the clinic will not have found your TB, and you continue to spread it on to up to 15 people a year. Now the rats are finding another 40% on top of what the clinics have found. And in Dar es Salaam, in Mozambique, Ethiopia, we're actually working at night, which is another question. When you work with the rats, do you work during the night? In order to get our results with the clinic results the next morning when the patient comes back, they have to work at night. So those rats are the only ones that actually work at night. For mine action, they can't. It goes against international mine action standards.
So that's kind of where this figure comes in. So where Lily says that it's an additional 40% of cases detected. So we found an additional 20,000 TB patients, and going on the basis that those patients will infect each one will infect a further 3 people. That's almost 170,000 TB cases that have been prevented. So in terms of efficiency, that's pretty good.
Yep. According to the WHO, actually, they can infect one person with active TB can infect up to 15 people a year.
15. Wow.
Incredible.
Yeah. Okay, so let's have a look at some more instances where they missed the bomb. No, they're not operational unless they are 100% effective during operations.
Basically, a rat cannot graduate if they're missing bombs.
Yeah.
They're 100% accurate and have never missed a landmine in the time that we've worked with them. They're incredibly effective.
You can answer this one, Lily. What's your favorite part of working with the rats?
I'm a bit of a wuss. I love the cuddles. I love Friday. To be fair, that's my favorite time. I love making videos of them shoving it all into their cheeks. A lot of people, when they visit us, they ask me, where are their pouches? So their pouches are in their cheeks. They're like a hamster. They store food. Naturally, at night, they go out and they'd be rummaging and looking for roots and things, and they put it all into their cheeks and go back into the burrow. And even here, like even though they're not in like a nest and they're out in nature, they do shove it all into their cheeks and go back into their kennel. And they're very neat. They have a place where they go to the bathroom, a different place where they eat, and they would just kind of like dump it there and then eat slowly throughout the night, basically.
Their kitchens, I like that.
They're very, very clean.
Right, so I'm going to move on to some questions that we had about hero dogs. We have got some more questions coming in. I think some of these we might answer in the course, so I'll come back to that for now. I'll close it. We had quite a few questions about the hero dogs, whether or not we were replacing our hero rats or switching in some way. That's absolutely not the case. So actually, technical survey dogs work to run through. So when our rats, I should start from the top really. So when our rats are actually doing a micro search, we have to cut the ground, and they work very close to the ground. They don't want twigs or obstacles in the way to be able to detect any of the landmines. We never cut down trees. We just cut down shrubs and grass. You go back 6 months later and the whole thing is as green as it was, 6 months prior. But we do need to take that action so the rats can conduct their micro searches. The technical survey dogs are really, really good at speeding up operations because they can run through grass, they can run through shrubland. You can see here that Manis is wearing a smart backpack, and that smart backpack, and on the next picture there, that's Gizmos, and you have the handler has a smartphone. The dogs are trained, so they are heavier than the rats. They're trained to sit 1 meter away from the scent of explosives. And as they sit, the backpack points upwards, and then that can be GPS marked by the handler. So we know there's an explosive in that area. We can pinpoint all the explosives, but really rapidly, we can actually declare lots and lots of areas mine-free. So I think it's something like 3% of a landmine field actually contains the landmines. Is that right, Lily? So 97% of that area won't contain explosives. We can declare that 97% landmine free, explosive free really quickly with the dogs without having to cut down any vegetation at all. So they're complementary to the rats. Once they have actually detected any scent of explosive, we obviously can refine it, and it's a much smaller area that we just need to clear, and then our hero rats come in and do their micro search. So the hero dogs are there really just to sort of speed up efforts. They're not there to replace the hero rats in any way, shape or form. So I think, are there any other? Yeah, so I think that's the process of it. The hero dogs
There's somebody
answered.
here asking, has there been any cases where you declared a piece of land as mine free, but it turned out that it wasn't? No. It's really 100% accurate. We've never had any incidents on minefields. In fact, one of the things that we do, because the villagers, they kind of don't really trust us. And they think this whole rat business is a bit mad. So when we're done, we actually run onto the field just to show them that it's safe.
That's lovely. So there's a couple of questions that have come in about adoption. So I actually had these written down. So the questions that have come in about the adoption process, I'll run through that. So first of all, the reason we only have 3 rats and 3 dogs up for adoption is because APOPO is incredibly efficient. Our mission and our vision is to remove landmines, research what other applications we can use our hero rats for, and obviously stop the spread of tuberculosis. That's where we want to put our efforts in terms of manpower and time. So we have only 3 rats and 3 dogs that we report on, because it takes quite a lot of time to gather the imagery. We keep medical records on every single one of our animals and statistics on each one, but writing up that information, creating nice emails and adoption updates is time consuming. So we just limit it to the 3 rats and the 3 dogs so that we can focus our efforts on, getting rid of landmines and tuberculosis. In terms of how many people adopt each animal, so it is a co-adoption scheme. It costs a huge amount of money, believe it or not, to keep our beautiful hero rats operational. So we wouldn't expect one person to do that on their own. You are part of one big sort of extended hero rat family, as it were, and you are funding the hero rat that you're adopting, but also the other hero rats that are out there working, doing the same sort of work across the world. So it's just a sort of nice way for you to be able to get updates, and those updates are legitimate, but we wouldn't want to be able to do it for, how many did you say were working, Lily? I think we'd be
80 are operational.
Yeah.
Rats.
So we'd have to stop demining so that we could tell you all about them. So that's kind of the rationale for that. In terms of where your money goes, this is I started at APOPO in February, and actually I think this is a really impressive statistic. So of every dollar, euro, pound that you donate to APOPO, 90% of that goes directly to the work that we do in the field. So across the UK, the charity average is 17%. And ours is only 10% that goes to administrative costs. That covers administrative costs, the fundraising costs. We're incredibly lean as an organisation. And again, that's because we want to get rid of landmines and we want to stop the spread of tuberculosis. That's genuinely where your money goes. So 90 cents of every euro or dollar goes directly to the work that we do, and not very much at all goes to administrative costs. I really love that statistic, and I hope you all like that too. Another question I think we had, let's see, I've got some specific ones in here about the K5 mine belt or the Ho Chi Minh Trail. I don't know if you can answer those, Lily, but we can certainly come back to any specific questions that we can't answer just here now.
Are these new questions that have just come in?
I'm just scrolling through.
So can I just quickly answer one, because it's interesting?
Yeah.
Tanya's asking, if these rats are abundant, it's not clear why they need to be bred. When APOPO first started the idea was born in 1997, initially we sent adult wild rats to Belgium to be trained in Belgium. They very quickly found out that these rats are not going to be trainable because they're wild animals, and it was just impossible. They were very, very aggressive. They did not comply, basically, and they were, it was very, very stressful for them. So rather than removing wild rats, adult rats, and trying to train those, we then bred the rats for the first time in Belgium and trained the babies, and it was a whole other ball game. The babies are very easy. They learn trust from a very early age. So that's why we don't train the wild rats. We
Yeah.
train the babies, and we've been doing that ever since.
I've got a really good question about the vegetation cutting, actually, because it was one of the questions I had. How come the machines don't set off all of the landmines? I don't know if you want to answer that, Lily.
Well, so these machines, they're like a digger, but at the end of it, it's like a lawnmower. So that it's not a scoop. And it just kind of cuts the grass from the sides, and it swivels to try and get as much leverage from the road that it's safe. But, occasionally they will set off a landmine, and it does do some damage, but they are reinforced underneath like a tank. And this is one of our biggest costs, is to either rent or buy one of these machines for an operation. So some of them are remote controlled, sometimes there's a driver, but they can take a hit, but then you're not sure that they've taken everything, because there's different weights, there's different depths for the various landmines, and you have to be 100% sure. So we still need to check the land, even though the one or two landmines might have been set off. Yeah.
I think there's a question that's come in. I think possibly Joan McDonald, you might have missed the first bit, but she was asking about the local staff involved, how are they hired, trained and compensated. So I don't know if you don't mind just quickly going over that again, because I love this. I do, it's really important.
APOPO tries to hire locally as much as possible. We have a policy of trying to at least have 90%, if not 95%. That's what we're trying to achieve. Local staff working in our programs. So here in Tanzania, you would come in for an interview. You just need to have finished high school, and you need to really like rats. In fact, during your interview, what we actually do is somebody will come in with a rat and kind of just put them in the lap of the interviewee. and see
not conventional interview.
Yeah, and just by their reaction, we will be able to gauge whether they're APOPO material or not. You have to really love being around animals and working with rats, and it'll be very clear. So once they're hired, we train them over a course of 3 months, and this involves animal behavior. This involves, sort of like clicker training, all the different aspects of the training, but also, how to look after the rat, how to tell whether a rat is feeling okay or not, how to, and obviously over time they will learn more as they're working together with sort of experienced handlers. So every rat will have 2 handlers. And when we're hiring, we would have a new handler paired with a more experienced handler to kind of explain things. And yeah, they have salaries, they feed their families, put their kids through school. That's part of what APOPO wants to achieve. It shouldn't be sort of, people swooping in from, I don't know, Belgium. We want the solution to be, from the people.
Yeah, definitely. I had a really good question coming in, and I've had this one before on a previous, whether or not the rats might fib so they can get the treats.
Whether or not they can what?
Whether or not the rats will lie and say that there is a positive TB sample just so they can have their treats.
Initially they will, because that's part of the training. It's like once they figure out, hey, if I go to one of these tea eggs, I get something. But they very quickly learn that if they go to one that doesn't have TB, they don't get rewarded. So they have to continue. And you actually see them coming back for the treat, like, yeah, I'm ready to bring it.
And also
It
with the
does
TB,
happen.
once the rats have found positives, they're also then tested again, aren't they, by WHO endorsed methods. So you're
Yeah.
confirming the positives as well. So we don't have any sneaky rats, although.
No. Although we have, I should probably mention that we're doing a study at the moment. We've had
I want
samples
to move
that
on. Hang on to innovation. There we go.
no, it was actually about TB, but yes, okay.
Oh, okay.
So we have had rats that were TB detection rats that have consistently, like a bunch of them, said this is TB to a sputum sample. When the clinic said it's absolutely not TB, we checked it with the WHO gold standard, which is a culture, growing a culture, so you can actually see it. It also said there's no TB. We checked it with what the WHO is now rolling out, and it's called a machine called the Gene Expert, which checks for TB at a molecular level. And it also didn't find the TB. And the rats was still saying, this is TB. So what we've started doing is we've been following these patients over time, and we found that it seems that some of the patients are developing TB later. So it's possible that the rats are able
Wow.
to detect it early. Obviously, it's way too early to make any claims to that, but it's very, very interesting that
That
they're
is.
yeah.
Yeah, wow. Really
Mm.
early stages of the disease. Yeah. Okay, well, so moving on to innovation, there were quite a lot of questions coming in about whether or not we're training our rats to do anything else. So over to you,
Right.
Lily.
I guess our biggest project right now is our anti-wildlife trafficking rats. We're training a group of rats to, initially, a couple of years ago, we were training them to detect pangolin scales and illegally trafficked hardwoods like ebony, which it was kind of the pilot project, and we're just proving the principle. And they very, very efficiently did prove that they can smell pangolin scales, even when they're masked among sort of the things that smugglers would typically use, that this kind of information that we got from the port authorities, that they usually hide it in coffee or sort of plastic dolls or whatever they normally use. So we've been actually training them against these common smells, including food items, some of them.
Oh.
Yeah, which is always interesting. So now this year, and we've set out to expand the sample set. So we've included some additional endangered species, and they've just been doing an amazing job. So we continued with the rats that initially started to look for pangolins. We've been training them to look for these new animals, and they're doing really, really great. And we found that when we also include pangolin scales again in their training with these new smells, they're also hitting the pangolin. So they know that that is still a smell that
Yeah,
I'm supposed to go for, which is really, really incredible.
that is
And now
amazing.
we're expanding that as well to include a little micro squitch around their neck, basically. That so generally our rats would tell us that they found a sample. If in the cage, it would be by dunking their holes in into the hole and keeping it there for 3 seconds. That's how they tell us they found something. And if it's, if it's not in a lab situation, it would be by scratching at the surface. So we've taught these particular rats to pull at a lever around their neck, because later on, if we send them out into a container, they could pull at the lever, which is send a signal and alert us to that they found something, because we won't always be able to see them if we send them into these containers, for example, to look for hidden parcels. So they're doing really, really well, and we're just fine tuning the system. We're actually there on a leash at the moment. I think Emma might have a video later if we have enough time.
Yeah.
We also have a different project called Search and Rescue Rats. We've currently raised enough money to
Well, before
build.
you go on to the rescue rats,
Uh-huh.
we have to answer Suzanne's question, because
Yeah,
Suzanne came early, and
yeah.
it was about, and a few other people have asked a similar sort of question about whether or not we're using them to detect COVID. So I think we have to answer that question.
Well, we're confident that the rats can learn to detect any particular smell that has a specific odor. So COVID would definitely be something that they could smell, but we have not been able to really roll out that kind of testing, because our training center is here in Tanzania. And I don't know if you've sort of been seeing stuff in the news, but our former president was very anti-COVID and he was kind of in denial. So not to get very political, but there was no COVID in Tanzania, which meant that we didn't have access to samples. So when we're training the rats, we need at least, say, 4,000 positive samples versus 6,000 negative samples in order to train them, and we don't have access to this. So it's not something that we feel they can't do, it's just we don't have the resources to do it.
Yeah. One thing though that I do know is that in the front line in sort of Ethiopia, Tanzania, Mozambique, went our motorbikes that we normally use for TB carrying sort of enlisted for COVID samples and stuff. We kind of on the front line sort of pitched in a bit.
Right. Yeah. So trying to help where we can, basically, and we've always been looking for ways to sort of help.
We've handed out masks and provided education on sort of hygiene, social distancing, and that kind of thing as well. Sorry, I'll let you get back to rescue rats because I love the rescue rats, and we've got a video. So
right. So I'll just quickly talk about the rescue rats. We're also we got interest from a consortium in Europe who do search and rescue, and they were really interested in using the rats to help locate survivors after sort of natural disasters like building collapse and that kind of thing. So we've been working together with the University of Eindhoven in the Netherlands, who are developing a small little cute little backpack that has a camera, a microphone, and it could be expanded to have like GPS signal or some kind of microchip to so that when they pull at the lever on the neck that they will be able to be entering some kind of information. We're not sure yet, we're still working on the logistics of it, but these rats, we've now been able to get enough funding to start building a debris site, which is ongoing at the moment, so that we could train them in more realistic settings. It's been very much kind of, yeah.
They put the video on.
Yeah, you can put the video.
Let's do the video. I hope you can hear this. Can you hear that?
Nope. I can't. You'll probably have to unplug your...
Yeah.
There we go. All right. I'm not getting sound very well.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the sound is working, but to be fair, it's just music. We've got subtitles. I'll move that out of the way so it's subtitles.
Lovely.
Sorry about that. I don't think you could hear the music. It was just music, so hopefully you got the gist.
Well, I guess we could, we have a YouTube channel and you'll find all these videos explaining what we do and how the rats, if you want to see what I mean by the TB detection cage and how we train the rats in the minefield, head over to our YouTube channel.
Yeah, I'll put the link
on our website. Yeah.
I'll put the link in the chat. If there are any other questions, I don't know if you want to have a look and see if there are any other questions, Lily. Well, how long have we got? We've got 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Did you ever accept volunteers? Did you cover that?
No, actually, I don't think I did. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, again, I think it harks back to what Lily was saying about making sure that we are hiring local people and keeping people that are in these areas employed. So if we if we ever need some sort of voluntary help, usually it's sort of in an administrative way, potentially sort of across sort of fundraising, that kind of thing. Anybody that wants to work with the rats, really, that should be jobs that go to local people. That makes sense. Let's have a look at some more questions.
How many bananas do they eat per day? Or are they just used for rewarding? That's funny. Actually, the rats don't eat very much. And it's a fine line. We weigh them every morning before they start training because, you know, they have to be growing well. But if they get too much, they don't want to train. So it's kind of a fine balance that we have to find between overfeeding them and giving them, you know. But I mean, a banana and a handful of peanuts will get them through to the next day easy. So they don't eat a whole lot, but which is also one of the advantages of using rats, because they're very, very easy to maintain. But we do make sure that all of our food is fresh. So we every day somebody's going to the market getting fresh fruit, fresh vegetables. We actually roast our peanuts just to make sure there's no bacteria on them before. So they're like treated.
I didn't know that. Yummy.
Yeah. I know. Sometimes I head over when they're roasting.
Yeah, I know.
What other questions? Do you have a personal favorite rat? Yes. My favorite
go on.
was Chewa. Unfortunately, he passed on. But he was the first TB detection adoption rat. And he was lovely. He was huge. He was like 1.6 kilos. But he was such a gentle little guy. He was lovely.
So what happens to the found explosives? That's quite a good question, I think.
Right. So we when we find explosives, so minefield, let's say we find 2-3 landmines every day for a couple of weeks. We collect it all. So once the rat finds a landmine, manual deminer will go in and excavate from the side or from underneath, because obviously we don't want to set it off, but it's very slow work, and from a wide berth, because scent particles can move. So they go in, they dig it up, and then they have to defuse it. If they can't defuse it, we would have to blow it up in situ, but as much as possible, we take all of the landmines, and especially in places that are near settlements, which most of them are, we would take the landmines somewhere very far and just do one big explosion per week or per month, depending on how much we're finding. Okay. So we destroy them, yeah.
Well, I think we've got time for one last question. What happens to the rats that fail training?
Oh, there's not that many that do fail training. The first thing we would try and do is to see if they were better suited for one of our other training programs. So for example, I've seen a couple of rats that just didn't like being out in the minefield. It's very, wide open space. They're very exposed. It's not natural for them. But then they were repurposed and retrained as a TB detection rat, which is in a cage. It's inside a room. It's much more cozy, and they were much more comfortable in that way, and they excelled. So we try and repurpose them into our other, sometimes it could be, research project, something like that. If it absolutely is not working out, then we would probably do early retirement, but I can't think of any in the last couple of years that have had that. Yeah. Okay, so I put a link up to, somebody's found a fun song on our YouTube channel. So I put the link up to some merchandise. Somebody asked about that, and the YouTube channel. There will be a recording of this session as well, so you should automatically all get that. Any problems, just drop me an email. Any further questions as well, just drop me an email. Lily and I will happily respond to you via email. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. And thank you, Lily, because it's super late with Lily in Tanzania. It was fun. Thank you all for coming in. We love sharing about the hero rats and the hero dogs. So thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, have a good day, everybody. Morning, evening, wherever you are. And I'm sure we'll do something like this again soon. It'd be great to see you all there. Yes. Right, cheerio. Thank you, Lily. Bye. See you. Bye, everyone.